Hey guys, thought it would be fun today to show you what I feel is an invaluable tool, not only in my own golf game, but in my teaching. Just a little Excel spreadsheet here. So basically what it is it's a strokes gained analysis tool. I'm sure all of you have heard that term if you're paying attention to any of the golf on the PGA Tour. Dr. Brody's basically data that he's gathered over the year to be able to tell you essentially how much any shot that you hit has gained or lost um, versus the field on the PGA Tour. So um, I've got this Excel spreadsheet here that basically uses a data sheet of all the information from the PGA Tour. So you can see here on the screen, if the average score for a PGA Tour player teeing off from 100 yards is 2.92 strokes. Kind of makes sense. 100 yards would be a pretty short par 3. Average score when the PGA Tour tees off from exactly 100 yards is 2.92 strokes. You can see how this changes as you go up from yard by yard. Tee shot from 101 is 2.9235. 2.927 from 102, and on and on. And basically this sheet here goes through all the different distances. So for example, on a very long par 3, let's call it 235, when the PGA Tour tees off from 235, by contrast they average 3.23 strokes. Then we get into, so you've got all the different tee shots, I think up to 600 yards. I'll show you what that one is as we get there. So when the PGA Tour tees off from 600 yards, average score is 4.82. 600 yards, pretty long par 5, still under par for those guys on tour. Then we get into the fairway distance. So the shortest fairway distance with data is from the fairway 5 yards out. It takes an average of 2.03 to get it in the hole from 5 yards out for the PGA Tour. What does that mean? It means pretty much all the time, from 5 yards out in the fairway, they're getting it down in 2 shots. You'd expect that. You'd expect those guys to get it up and down from 5 yards away from the flag in the fairway. That's only 15 feet. So you can imagine that as being right on the fringe, 15 feet from the cup, but just not quite on the green. So that kind of makes some sense there. And you've got all the fairway distances as you go further and further out. So stop at 100 here for a second. From 100 yards out in the fairway, guys on tour are getting it in the hole 2.8 strokes to get in the hole from 100 yards out in the fairway. So for those of you that think that the PGA Tour guys get it up and down every time from 100 yards in the fairway, it's not quite. It takes about 2.8 strokes to get in the hole. Every time would be 2.0, so it's closer to taking them 3 shots on average, getting up and down from 100 yards out in the fairway. About 200 yards out in the fairway, 3.19 strokes. So not only are they not getting it up and down very often from 200 yards out in the fairway, but they are actually over 3 strokes from 200 yards out in the fairway. Okay, so you kind of go through all the fairway distances up to about, I forget what this goes to. Yep, you've got information here all the way out to, looks like 600 yards in the fairway. So 600 yards out in the fairway, 4.94. So then you've got rough, same thing, starts at 5 yards out. So if you happen to be 4 yards out in the rough, we have to find a different way to put that in the system. Doesn't happen very often because it's hard to be 4 yards from the hole actually in the rough. You don't often get that situation. So from 5 yards out in the rough, 2.19, again a little higher than 5 yards out in the fairway. Rough should be technically a little tougher, which we see that it is, and then different distances as you get further and further out in the rough. So even though you might expect that from 94 yards in the rough, guys are getting it up and down often, it's actually more like on the green and then 2-putt. from 94 yards out in the rough, 3.002. So that's the average. The average from 94 yards in the rough is on the green, 2 putts. So we go all the way through the rough distances. And again, as you get further and further out, you get higher and higher numbers. From 220 in the rough, it takes the PGA Tour on average 3.53 strokes to get it in the hole. And we continue on through all this data. And we get to sand. So we go rough 600. And then we get to the sand, again, starting at 5 yards. So from 5 yards out, literally 15 feet from the hole in the sand, takes the PGA Tour 2.28 strokes to get the ball in the hole on average. So for a 30-foot bunker shot, sand, 10 yards out in the sand, 2.43 to get it in the hole. Now, I thought it was interesting at the beginning to start to look at these numbers and realize that on average, the PGA Tour guys are not maybe as good as I gave them credit for from certain distances. Okay, so we go all the way through sand here. Obviously, you can be in sand in a lot of different places, so this goes out to 600 yards out in the sand as well. And we've got this recovery piece of data. Now, this one starts at 100 yards, so this one gets a little dicey as far as entering it for yourself. Recovery is basically when you're in a situation, imagine it, you hit one off into the trees on the right, and some of the trees are directly on your way to the flagstick, blocking your path to the flagstick. So you've either got to pitch out to the side, you've got to curve it around them, whatever the case may be. That is a recovery situation, when your ball is behind a standing obstacle that blocks your direct line to the hole. So now this gets a little tricky when you are less than 100 yards out and in a situation where you're behind a tree or something, which certainly can happen. What I do in that situation is I just play those as rough from 99 yards. And it's a little different. Obviously, it's more difficult than just being in the rough, but it's basically the best we've got at this point for measuring that. So anytime you're 100 yards or more out from the green and in a recovery situation, this is how you would enter it. So when the PGA Tour is 150 yards out behind a tree or some other standing obstacle, they average 3.805 strokes to get the ball in the hole. Alright, so this goes all the way down here to 600 yards as well. And then we're finally on the green. So green goes in feet now instead of yards. And green, we've got every foot covered all the way along, and I'll show you the very end of that. But so from 1 foot out on the green, the PGA Tour averages 1.01 strokes to get in the hole. Kind of makes sense. Basically, they make every 1 footer, and occasionally they miss a 1 footer. So you'd expect that to be right around there. From 3 feet out on the green, 1.04. They make most of their 3 footers. They miss about 4 out of 100 of these 3 footers. So it takes them 1.04 to get in the hole from 3 feet. 8 feet is always an interesting point for me. I think a lot of times people have this sense that PGA Tour guys make every 8 footer. Really, they basically make 1 out of every 2. So they average 1.5 strokes to get it in from 8 feet. So you can imagine this as if you've got 100 guys putting an 8 footer and none of them three putt. And again, that's an assumption there. I'm not saying that none of them do 3 putt from 8 feet. But if those 100 guys, none of them 3 putt, that means that 50 of them made it and 50 of them missed it from 8 feet to get your 1.5. Again, I like to see kind of the break-even points. So the 2.0, the average 2 putt, or the break-even spot for 2 putting is right here at around 33 feet, somewhere around 32.5 feet. So once you get outside 33 feet, the average on the PGA Tour is more than 2 strokes to get in the hole. So what does that mean? I see a lot of people that are pretty upset if they 3 putt from 45 feet. Well, from 45 feet, the PGA Tour average is 2.1 strokes. So if you two-putt from 45 feet, you're actually gaining strokes versus the guys on the PGA Tour. Something to keep in mind. And as we get out here to the longest putt that we've got data for here on the green is 90 feet. Now sometimes you'll have a putt over 90 feet. Basically you just want to list that as a 90-footer. So that's a quick explanation of what the spreadsheet is pulling from. And now I'll go in and show you how you input data. So basically this here is my full season of playing competitively in 2016. And what you do is the only place you enter in are any of these green areas. So the only place that you can enter information. These white areas calculate for you based on the information you've entered. So the first place you're entering information here is in the date. So obviously you can see for this date, the date remains the same all the way down. So you can tell that this first round I played was on 4/11/2016, April 11th, and then my date changes. So as long as I put this date in the same, the cumulative strokes will keep going up. So I shot 75 in that round, so I purposely put 75 cells worth of this 4/11 date, and it counts up my strokes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 all the way down. So this was a shotgun event, so I started on hole 13. So the first information I entered was hole 13. Type of shot was a tee shot. Those go back to all the different areas of data in that data sheet from earlier. So those have to be entered exactly that way. So tee shot is capital T E E space capital S H O T. The great thing is after you type that one time, when you start to type it again here down on 14, it auto fills and you can just hit enter. And then you put your starting distance. So this hole that I played, the 13th hole at Old Oaks, was 431 from the tee we played it. It was a tee shot, and basically the first thing that it calculates for me is that the average strokes to get it in the hole on the PGA Tour from a tee shot of 431 is 4.053. This is a kind of long par 4, so that makes sense. Average strokes on PGA Tour from 431, they play it slightly over par. I then proceeded to snap hook my first tee shot of the year into a situation where I was 185 out directly behind a tree. That new situation, 185 out behind a tree, takes the PGA Tour on average 3.8325 strokes to get in the hole. So you see up here on the right that drive lost 0.7795 strokes versus the PGA Tour. That kind of makes some sense. Well, how did they figure that out? They calculated the difference between 4.05 to 3.8325, which is the new situation I'm in, which is about 0.22 something, right? And then I used one shot to get into a situation that was only 0.22 something better. So they took 0.22 something from that shot that I hit and came up with negative 0.7795. So that shot essentially lost 0.7795. Now let's say, I'm going to let you watch how this changes. Let's say that I had ended up in the fairway at 185. Let's see how this number up here in this box changes when I enter fairway. So I enter fairway, and you see that change to minus 0.0545. So lost much less. Now for this 431 yard hole, let's move this fairway distance to see where I would actually break even an average drive on the PGA Tour from on that length of hole. So I lost 0.05 there. Let's try 182 if I had hit it 3 yards further in the fairway. 0.03. Let's try 176. Basically 0.000. Let's try 175. 0.00 as well. About 73. Slightly gained. So somewhere in that 173 174 range in the fairway would have been an average drive on the PGA Tour for this hole. Okay, so I think that calculates out to about 260 is what it looks like to me, 258, something like that. Would have, and I'm not saying been an average distance drive, but would have put me in a situation where I didn't lose or gain strokes with that drive. Reason why is from 173 out in the fairway, you can see these guys take 3.04 to get it in the hole from there. Okay, so you basically used one shot to put yourself in a position where your situation is now one stroke worth better. Okay, so I'll change this back to recovery 185, and you'll see that that number changes back accordingly. So that's kind of how you enter your information. Try and find one here where I hit into a penalty situation just so you can see how that works. Hopefully I don't find one too quickly here. There we go. There's a penalty. So this was a ball in that same round where I hit my tee shot into a hazard down the right side of the fairway. So the way that you enter that is you fit your tee shot from 441 into a penalty situation. So you always put penalty and P for the distance. And then you enter your next situation. So I ended up having to drop in the rough, and I was 197 yards out. So you see that that tee shot in particular lost me 1.3190 strokes, okay? Because it put me into a penalty situation and then a situation where my next shot was from a point where the PGA Tour averages 3.403 to get it in the hole. So now had this gone out of bounds, for example, I would have typed in here tee shot 441, and you would see this number in the strokes gained on PGA come out to just a -2. Anytime you hit it out of bounds and you have to re-tee, you automatically just lose 2 strokes because you're now in the same situation that you were, but your score is 2 strokes higher. Okay, so you kind of go along like that and you enter all your information. And so obviously this is my entire season in 2016, so there's a lot of information in there. And I put a couple extra cells in here at the end so we can do some demonstrating of how you're entering this. But then what I can come and do is come over to here to analysis by shot category. And so I've got the date range here set up for the entire year, January 1st, 2016 to December 31st, 2016. And what it's done for me is, or what I've got this Excel spreadsheet set up to do, is I've got it set up to analyze how well I do at all these different shots versus the PGA Tour. So drives it categorizes as tee shots on any hole 250 yards or longer. Typically, won't play a par 3 that's 250 or longer, and in that scenario, I'd probably almost consider that a drive anyway. So what this will do is it'll take, even short par 4s, but any hole that's a par 4 or a par 5, and it tells me that on those shots, which I hit 166 of them in 2016, how many total strokes I gained or lost versus the PGA Tour. So in this case, my driving lost 19.7 strokes over the year versus the PGA Tour. And then it'll also calculate over here per shot. So my average drive, based on this definition here, or tee shot, you can think of it as tee shot on par 4s or par 5s, lost 0.119 per shot this year versus the PGA Tour. I'm not on the PGA Tour, so if I lose a tenth of a shot per drive, that's really not too bad. Not too happy with that driving. Those guys are the best in the world. So if I'm losing 0.119 per shot, I'm not too unhappy with that. Obviously, would love to make that a little bit better, and that gives me a good sense of something that I need to work on. When you look at these strokes gained per shot, where do I lose the most per shot? I lose the most driving. So that's something I'll be looking at in 2017, is how do I get that number to come down just a little bit? Every time that I get this number to come down by a stroke, that means my my score has gotten better by a stroke for the year. Okay, so then we have approach shots. We'll come to that one last because it's all shots that don't fit into the other 4 categories. Short game shots. So short game shot is any shot from 60 yards and in that isn't on the green. All right, so basically that is could be a bunker shot, basically anything around the green that's not on the green, and is 60 yards or less from the hole. You see there I lost 8.927 in my 107 attempts at that over the season, so I lost .083. That was my second worst category in driving. So I need to drive the ball better first. I need to short game the ball better, if you will, second. I lose .083 per attempt there. That's a situation where I think I should be able to do that as well as the PGA Tour guys, because it doesn't have anything to do with distance. All right, so that's where I might go in and look at specific short game shots and see if there are particular ones where I lost a lot versus the PGA Tour. Putting. This is putts from on the green only. If you enter a putt from the fringe as fairway 5, that's going to register as a short game shot. So these are putts from on the green only. I took 379 putts over the year in 2016, and I lost 10 strokes total versus the PGA Tour. This was out of the 4 main categories, not counting recovery, this was my best category. I lost .02 versus the PGA Tour with my putting. So I did a nice job putting this year. I didn't lose very much with my putting. I could do better because I could start gaining. So that's certainly something that I'll look at, is how would I start gaining? If I just eliminate three putts, would this number change to positive? So certainly something I'll look at. But my best category of the year. And then we have recovery. Recovery is literally any shot that only falls into that recovery category. So those, remember, as I mentioned earlier in the video, were from 100 yards out or more, because we don't have information from less than that. And it's when the ball is in a situation where it's blocked by some type of standing obstacle, typically a tree, that blocks the direct path to the hole. So now, typically, I find that in those recovery situations, I gain strokes. I think the reason for that is a lot of times recovery situation, you can if you pitch out to the fairway, you'll find that you gain. So basically, what that tells me is that when those guys on tour are in those type of recovery situations, probably a lot of times they have to take an unplayable, or they're in a situation where maybe they try and pull off a shot that that puts them in more trouble. So their averages from, let's say, 150 out in recovery, the average score on that is very high. So if you can just get it into a situation where now you're back to 80 yards out in the fairway, you're going to gain strokes versus the PGA Tour with that shot. So you see I had 24 of those situations throughout the year in 2016, and I actually gained versus the PGA Tour. Probably because from those situations, maybe I play a little more conservative and I just put it into a situation that's better and manageable at that point. So with those particular shots, I gained 2.6 over the year versus the PGA Tour, and gained .10 per shot. So that was a pretty good category for me, but not necessarily a very significant category. Only 24 shots total. It's not like I'm going to purposely hit into recovery situations so that I can gain shots back. I certainly lost more on all the other shots than I could possibly gain back in recovery. It's just that when you're in recovery, you'd like to gain rather than lose some more. So I think I did a good job of that. Now we'll go back into approach shot. That's every shot that doesn't fit into the other 4 categories. So if it's a tee shot from 249, I happen to play a 249-yard par 3, that actually, based on this breakdown, would fit into an approach shot. Tee shot on a par 3 from 170, that also fits into approach shot. I wanted that those par 3 shots to count for me towards my approach shots. I didn't want those to count as drives. if I'm 61 yards out in the rough, that I counted as an approach shot, because short game only counts from 60 yards and in. So I felt that 60 was a good break-even point, where after 60 yards, you're not, in my mind, short gaming anymore. You're hitting an approach shot. So that's how I set this spreadsheet up to calculate. Obviously, putts on the green are not approach shots. So anything from 60 yards or more is an approach shot, unless it was a recovery shot. So it doesn't count these recovery shots in my approach shots. So you see I had 205 of those this year, or in 2016, and I lost 14 strokes versus the PGA Tour. Basically lost 0.07 per approach shot. Again, I think that's pretty good. These guys are the best in the world. If I'm hitting from 220 out in the fairway and I lose 0.07 to the best in the world, pretty happy with that. So you can see that over the season I took 881 strokes. My average score was 73.42. That lost 50 strokes overall versus the PGA Tour. So the PGA Tour basically would have taken, from the distances that I played, the tee boxes that I played, the PGA Tour would have taken about 831 strokes there on average. I took 881. What that means, and I've got this calculated out as well, my average score was 73.42, again from the tees that I played from. The PGA Tour would have averaged 4.215 less than me from those tees that I played. So their average score would have been whatever 73.42 minus 4.2 is. So, somewhere in that 69 area. And that makes sense to me. I don't, the tournaments that we play, we don't always play the longest courses. So I would expect the average score on the PGA Tour to be around 69 on those courses, and I averaged 73. So, not a bad year for me. Obviously would love that number to come down a little bit, but pretty good overall, and that should give you a sense for how to use the spreadsheet here. Alright, so now I thought it'd be fun to look at a recent PGA Tour event. So we're going to get back over here to the input category, and I just made a little fake 2017 four-shot round here, if you will, so that we can watch how some of these things calculate. So I'm going to put up on the screen here this footage of the Honda Classic final round, and we'll go through and we'll do some of these shots. The great thing about this is that the guy who's commentating is telling you all the distances from the hole on every shot, which is fun.
Final round of the Honda Classic from the Champion Course at PGA National.
We got Johnny Vegas here.
We begin with Jonathan Vegas working the 15th, first hole of the Bear Trap. Such a treacherous stretch, but Johnny Vegas from 179 yards out on a straight line, and that one in for an ace. Second ace of the week at 15.
So Johnny Vegas, they said from 179 out. Obviously that was a tee shot on number 15, par 3. So 179 out, and he made it. All right. So it'd be interesting to look at. So that was the 15th hole. So we put that in as 15. It'd be interesting to look at how much he gains with that shot. So he hit his tee shot, and he was 179 yards out. And then he basically goes to the 16th. So we start to enter 16 tee shot. And let's just arbitrarily put in 400 so we can see. And you see that his tee shot on 15, when you don't have any additional shot, it just assumes that you made it. So 15 tee shot 179, he gained 2.047 strokes with that shot versus the PGA Tour average. PGA Tour average from that distance on a par 3 is 3.047. He made it in one. Obviously that gains 2.047. So nice shot there by Johnny Vegas. It's always nice if you can gain more than 2 strokes with any one shot. You are doing some serious damage. Obviously a hole-in-one is doing some serious damage. So now we'll go back here and we'll let another one roll. We'll pop them in.
An incredible shot, and Vegas on his way to a top 5 finish.
My look-alike.
The 58, Hoffman with his third for 42 yards out. A nice hole out
So
from
42 yards, another hole out. So we're going to go back and just double check where Morgan was. Was he in the fairway or was he in the rough? He's in the rough there. That does not qualify as fairway.
This at the 8th. Hoffman with his
So
third
from
for
42 yards out in the rough,
a nice hole out from
he makes it.
off the green for birdie.
So let's go into our sheet here, and we'll just remember we're just at this point calculating these specific shots. So the nice thing about this Excel spreadsheet is that it will do it for you no matter what information you put in. So if you happen to start a hole, the 8th hole in the rough from 42 yards out, we know that that situation is a 2.793 average for the PGA Tour to get it in the hole from there. So, and then obviously Morgan didn't have any additional shots on that hole. So what does it show you? It shows you that he gained 1.793 with that particular shot. Pretty cool there that we just saw Johnny Vegas hole out the tee shot and we saw that he gained 2.04. This hole out from 42 yards in the rough by Morgan Hoffman was pretty good, but not quite as good as the hole-in-one from Johnny Vegas. Kind of what I would expect when I think about that situation. I maybe wouldn't think that it was almost as good. It was within basically 0.25 of Johnny Vegas's hole-in-one. So holing out from 42 yards, pretty good deal. He's gaining a lot of strokes with that shot. All right, let's watch another one.
To get to 6 under par. Ricky Fowler starting the day with the lead. Had a
Ricky Fowler,
shot advantage.
eventual
Here
champion.
he is at the third. Starting to add to it. Fowler, 11-footer. And that takes him to 14 under par.
So just a casual little 11-footer. Let's check out what an 11-footer gains for Ricky. So that was also on, I think not sure what hole they said it was on. Doesn't really matter. 4 green 11. You make an 11-footer, you gain 0.644. So that's a pretty nice gain for a putt when you can use one putt and gain 0.64. And you'll see a theme here as Ricky goes through the day. He gained a lot of strokes putting on this Sunday. All right, so that one was a gainer of 0.64.
So it looked like at that point he was in good form and well on his way.
Morgan
Hoffman.
again gaining strokes all over the place. It's no wonder that he came in. He tied for second in this event.
8 under from 35 feet away. Catches a piece of the right edge.
So Morgan the bomb from 35 feet. If you remember back what I said about the break-even point is around 33 feet. So if you're starting to do the calculations in your head, this is going to be a pretty big gainer. I can't remember what hole that was, but we'll just change it to a 35-footer. Gained over a stroke with that one putt because the average from 35 feet was 2.02. Is 2.02 to get it in the hole. He only used one stroke to get it in the hole, so he gained 1.02 with that putt. So anytime you're making 35 footers, you know you're doing something well. Gaining strokes.
Under par. This is
We'll watch
where
Ricky here.
Started to struggle just a little bit. Off the tee at the 6th, wind up and into him, and with that, a tug, and that
So he hits
finds
it in the
lake,
water
and that
there.
would lead to a double bogey.
So all they tell us is it would lead to a double bogey. This hole, I could tell you, I actually just played it just after the event here. Doesn't look like he's on the back tee box there, so I'm gonna guess he is around. This is number 6 at PGA National, so we'll go 6 tee shot. I think he's probably on a box that's about 470, 465. And he hits into a penalty situation, unfortunately. So we enter that as the same hole, penalty, and P for the distance. And we're just going to assume here, we don't know where he was, but he probably dropped in the rough along that hazard there. And he probably dropped it, looked like he was going to be quite a ways back there. So let's say he dropped it in the rough at 220. Right, I'm just going off of what I remember. I pounded one down there in the fairway, and I remember being a long way past where that ball went in, and I had 190 in from the fairway. So this will just do a calculation for us now that we've entered this. That tee shot that you just saw Ricky hit lost 1.33 strokes. Now, if he had, let's say he had kept it out of the water. Let's say he hit it in the right rough. Let's say he hit a pretty bad shot in the right rough at 220. That shot would have only lost 0.33. So my advice to Ricky in that scenario would be, the great thing about that hole is it's wide open to the right side. There's no penalty hazard on that right side until you get over to the opposite side of a different hole. So if he just kept that thing somewhere in play up the right, even if it was a poor tee shot, you see this would be a 245 tee shot into the rough, he would have saved himself a full stroke. So basically he would have just won by one additional stroke in that scenario. So always want to avoid penalty shots, and that's why there. Turned out that he won anyway, so didn't really matter, but he would have given himself one more stroke cushion.
And that finds the lake. That would lead to a double bogey. So he was offline with his tee shot, but he's getting back in form on the greens. This at the 8th after he lost.
This was on 8 after he hit a ridiculous recovery shot from the trees. If you heard there, they said that was a 30-footer. So let's check out a 30-foot putt. So let's say 6, green, 30. And obviously he wouldn't go into the rough, so we'll just get him set on the next hole. 7, tee shot. Sorry, he was on 8. Let's make him go hit his tee shot on 9. So the putt here, you can see from 30 feet gains 0.98. So even though he lost 1.33 on that tee shot on the other hole, he's gaining strokes all over the place with his putting. So he almost gained that loss of the tee shot back with that putt a couple holes later. So putting, as they say, is the great equalizer. Ricky definitely showed that on Sunday at the Honda. So now what I've got on the screen, Gary Woodland. The cool thing about this is we can see his drive was 310, and he's got 67 to the hole in the fairway on the 13th. So I'm going to be able to plug in this entire hole. 310 and 67 means the hole is 377. So the 13th tee shot, 377. He's on the 13th. He's in the fairway, 67. Now, little teaser here. Is he going to hit the green at a certain distance? We don't know. We'll find out here in a second when I play the video. That tee shot, so he hit it 310 on a 377-yard hole into the fairway. He gained .2365 with that tee shot. Really nice when you can gain that much with a tee shot. Gary Woodland, obviously one of the longest drivers out there, and when he drives it in the fairway, he gains with his tee shot, so it makes some sense. Let's see what he does from 67 in the fairway.
Gary Woodland now, does he have a chance to catch Fowler? 9 under as he comes to 13. And this in
yeah,
he would make the birdie.
That's pretty good there.
10 under par at 1.
So looked like about, let's see if we can get this back there. Looked like about a 3-footer there, and they said he made it. So we have the whole hole for Gary Woodland here. 3 feet. That you see that. So as good as the drive was, 0.23 gaining, the fairway shot from 67 yards to 3 feet was almost 3 times better. Gained 0.67 with that shot from the fairway, and then they said they made the 3-footer. So we'll just then send him to the next tee, which I think is like 430. Doesn't matter. You're going to see that this number doesn't change here on the right. He gained 0.04 with the putt. So when you break down that hole for Gary Woodland, he gained basically, let's add this up, 0.23 plus 0.67 is about 0.9, and he gained an extra 0.04 with the putt, so he gained basically 0.94 on that hole. So you can see if we go back to the tee shot was 3.954, the average from 377 on the tee. He took 3 shots to get it in. On that hole he gained 0.954. That's the addition of these 3 numbers. He gained most of that with a nice approach shot. 0.67 of that came from hitting the approach shot from 67 yards to 3 feet. So, you know, some people might think that the drive there is gains more versus the PGA Tour. It doesn't. It gains some, but he could have, if he could have still made that same birdie and been 100 yards out. Now that would mean that the 100-yard shot gained a little more. So if he had hit it to 100 yards, he gained a little less with the drive and a little more with the fairway shot. If he had driven it 10 yards closer, right, 57 yards in the fairway, you see that he gains a little more with the tee shot, but he's still using that fairway shot from 57 to gain a bunch. Let's say he had hit a ridiculous tee shot, right? Let's say he'd hit it to 5 yards off the front edge of the green, so 372. That's where you see that he really would have done most of his damage with that tee shot, because hitting from 5 yards out in the fairway to 3 feet on the green actually loses 1/10 of a shot. So let's say you drove it to 20 yards out in the fairway. There you go. Still, most of the gain would have happened there from the tee shot and not the fairway shot. So it's kind of an interesting tool with this spreadsheet that you can see, man, if I drove it 20 yards further on that hole. Some people come to me and say that what they really want to do is be able to drive it 20 yards further. Well, I can show them that if you drove it 20 yards further on every hole and didn't hit it any straighter, just hit it 20 yards further into the same situation, how much more would that gain in certain situations? It's kind of fun to look at that. Let's see if there's any more good ones to watch here.
To get to 10 under par. At one point, it was just a one-shot lead.
Ah, Ricky again with the putter. What a surprise.
12 from 38 feet.
38
from
feet.
the top half to this lower shelf. And what a putt at a
Awesome
big,
putt.
important time.
38 feet on the 12th hole. I was actually right there behind the green when he made that putt, heard the roar. It seemed to happen a lot on Sunday for Ricky. So that was on 12. Green. Oh. 12. Green. And they said 38 feet. So let's see what a 38 footer does for him. Gained 1.04 with that putt. Again, it's past the break-even point. You see that from 38 feet, PGA Tour average is 2.044. He used 1 to get it in, so he gained 1.044 with that. So a couple of those putts that you've seen Ricky make so far, you add those 3 putts that we've seen him make, and I think he's gaining almost 3 strokes. Means that 1.33 that he lost hitting that tee ball in the water didn't really end up mattering in the end because he gained it all back with good putting.
Fowler with birdies at 12 and 13, and now at 16.
And some good irons too.
Second hole of the bear trap, and at the par 4, he's dialed in. 183 yards to 3 feet, and he would make the birdie to get to
183 yards to 3 feet, and he would make the birdie. So let's plug that hole in. That's 16 at the bear trap. We don't have the teeing distance information, so we won't even put it in there. But we know he was 183 out in the fairway, and then he hit it to the green, 3 feet, and he made it. So then he went to the 17th tee, probably somewhere in that area. So let's take a look at that fairway shot and that putt. From 183 out in the fairway, these guys average 3.09 on average to get it in the hole from there. So they're not getting it up and down very often. They're not even getting it on the green and 2-putting all the time. They're averaging 3.09. Ricky took 2 shots to get it in from there. So between these two, the fairway shot and the 3-footer that he made, he gained 1.09 putts. Well, obviously, as you would expect, guys are going to make most of their 3-footers. He didn't gain much there, gained 0.04. But he gained over a full shot with that approach shot from 183 to 3 feet. So, again, a beautiful shot there. It gained him another full stroke. So that was basically the end there. The end of this video, they're just going to show him tapping in on 18. Tap-ins are not that exciting because they're not gaining many strokes. But I thought that would be cool to show you guys kind of how this spreadsheet works, how it can be valuable to you, how you can use it to figure out what parts of your game need changing. The great thing about it is Yes, it compares to the PGA Tour averages, but and so if you're not a PGA Tour player, if you're a 15 handicap, you can expect that you're going to lose strokes across the board. The nice thing is it's still giving you a reference point. So even though I'm losing versus the PGA Tour all the way across the board, I'm losing the most with my drives. All right. So if your drives you're losing zero point 0.5 per shot, but everywhere else you're only losing 0.2, tells you that you should focus on doing something with your drives, whether that be getting more accurate or whether it be learning how to get a little more distance on your tee shots. Um, it just shows you where you should focus your energies. Doesn't tell you how to do it. That's where you might need some help from a local PGA pro, but it does tell you where you should be focusing. And if you can give this kind of information to your local PGA pro, man, they can really give you some help if you're compiling information like this and giving that to them. So anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed that little tutorial about this strokes gained Excel spreadsheet that I have. Certainly feel free to contact me if you'd like some help with something like this. I can get you the spreadsheet. I can give you kind of a tutorial if you need more information on how to gather information as you go through a round. It's as simple as writing some stuff down on your scorecard after every shot. We typically always want to know the distance to the hole anyway. So as long as you can write down what condition you started in and your distance from the hole, as long as you can do a pretty good job estimating once you're on the green how long your putt is, you can get some pretty good and useful information here that you can start using to help you shoot better scores if that's what your goal in golf is. All right, thanks guys. Hope you enjoyed.